Um, okay, so I'm assuming that you can see my first slide. So governments and city authorities have been moving away from an understanding of the nighttime city as primarily a problem that has to be managed through restrictive planning and licensing and regulation and the policing of antisocial behaviours, to models that recognise the value of nighttime economies and nocturnal social and cultural infrastructures, to use the term that the London Plan uses. The European research collaboration NIGHT, which Urban Lab at UCL is part of, fits into this frame, considering the role of night spaces for migrant communities in 8 cities in Europe, with partners such as the London Night Tsar, as well as many community organisations. And we have a broad understanding of migration in this project, from settled diaspora to recent arrivals in cities. The evidence from this research suggests that planning for 15-minute neighbourhoods will be more effective if it's thought through a nighttime lens and takes on an intersectional approach which recognises the links between migration, migrant communities and identities, night spaces and nighttime work. We know that in Newham, citizens and officers have been thinking about how to take a proactive approach to enabling and managing the nighttime economy. And the borough is really uniquely placed to pursue approaches which enhance the most culturally and socially rich nighttime spaces and activities, which are rooted in and support its characteristic super diversity. In the UCL part of the Night project, we've been working specifically with LGBTQ migrants in East London, including in Newham, to understand the kinds of events and night spaces that are being created, and also experiences of the city at night. And by the way, this would be the subject for another talk, but I think the history of neighbourhoods and LGBT enclaves as another model of the 15-minute city is an interesting one to think about when you're in relation to this topic. So I'm only going to talk about the night from the perspective of the findings of the Night project here, but I want to say that UCL has a real wealth of projects that could help inform innovative evidence-based approaches to nighttime planning, from logistics to leisure and so on. And I'm more than happy to point colleagues and in the council towards those projects. So in the notes, I listed this publication, which draws together academic, artistic, activist, policy and community voices around reimagining the urban night after the pandemic or through the pandemic. And this publication, which you can find online, demonstrates that our research is collaborative with communities. And in this particular publication, we're interested in not just quantitative data about nighttime economies, but qualitative evidence and storytelling, and how those might inform an approach to the nighttime 15-minute neighbourhoods, and particularly at night. So the evidence that we've been gathering suggests how cities after dark afford possibilities for marginalised groups, and especially incoming migrants, but how they also reflect and can produce inequalities and negative experiences, which is something that the Night Tsar herself, a migrant, is interested in. So I've got 2 slides at the end here, and don't have time to read them out in detail, but I will circulate these. But the first slide really, I don't want to dwell on, because I think you'll probably already be thinking about lots of these things, because in the GLA's nighttime vision documentation that's been coming out, there is a shift to thinking about the social qualities of nighttime spaces and how these form part of our city's infrastructure. But I will just point out that within this slide, I want to point to the fact that these assets are often under threat within redevelopment processes and the gentrification processes that Christoph was referring to, and that actually some of the tools that we have in planning to safeguard these spaces do tend to prioritize certain kinds of community and certain types of space over more easily than others. But in relation specifically to the 15-minute neighbourhoods, if we think about this through a nighttime lens, I think that we will be needing to address various different challenges as well as opportunities. So the first is really how to approach nighttime spaces affirmatively, the best of nighttime spaces and activities. Obviously, others produce inequalities. So how do we think about these activities and spaces qualitatively as integral to placemaking? And how do we sustain things that are often transitory and pop up into more sustainable livelihoods and structures that support livelihoods and well-being? And in doing that, we will need to an approach that helps to negotiate between conflicting interests, that thinks about varied formations of community, that not all within a super diverse community, not everyone has the same approach and same understanding of community or the same models of family or sociality. That this involves varied experiences of locality, and at night this would perhaps involve differing experiences of safety or danger, and that perhaps especially with the pandemic, there is this need to consider the inequalities faced by night workers and what kind of services or health provision or support, economic support there are for those workers who have become more visible during the pandemic, and especially the numbers of logistics and platform workers, as well as thinking about the possibilities of making precarious nighttime venues more secure. So I will leave my comments there, but my main, the point that I wanted to get across is how do we think about the 15-minute neighbourhood through a nighttime lens, and the particular opportunities for doing that in Newham, in a borough with a super diverse community. So thanks very much for listening.